Well, we're back looking at what I'm calling America First immigration. I believe that immigration policy, immigration law and practice should be looked through a lens, a policy, if you will, or a litmus test that would force the person's, analyzing anything that we're going to do or proposing through a lens of, is it best for America? Is America being placed first here? So some of the items, and it's not exhaustive, would be to preserve the American unity and the culture of America. Also, it should not just preserve our national security, but perhaps even increase our national security. Why not? I think that we should also be looking at whether or not American students or workers are adversely affected by this in a really honest, data-driven way. Um, so that's what this series is intended to do. It was spawned by a great brouhaha or kerfuffle, depending on the way you approach it, on X regarding H-1B visas. But it's not just H-1B visas. It's not one illegal immigration bad, legal immigration good. Everything about our system is broken or corrupted, and we need to fix it. These 4 years are probably, if we bypass this opportunity, I don't know if we're going to get another opportunity to do it because we have the momentum, and we want to ensure President Donald Trump's 47th term in the White House, his presidency, is successful. And so today I am bringing on Todd Bensman. And Todd is a renowned expert in immigration, all things immigration. And I would say that with perhaps a lean toward national security, but you could maybe fill me in if you think that that's the right thing, Todd. And what we're going to be talking about is the United Nations and what I would call the cartel of NGOs that are deliberately conspiring together, being funded by the United States to facilitate or enable illegal immigration and to pressure the United States to even perhaps take more immigration that would be on the books called legal. And so that's going to be our focus today. As most of my conversations, we end up going wildly off in different tangents because everything's so related. Todd's book is Overrun. It is brilliant. It is very, very comprehensive. And I would suggest everybody get it because it is, of course, this is backwards, but whatever. Um, it is it's an education in half. If you want a PhD on illegal immigration and what happened during the Biden years, you need to read this. Todd, thank you for joining me.
Great to be here. Thank you for that intro.
Well, your book is amazing. I got it late, so I didn't get through it all, but it is fascinating and it's going to really help me in my mission to educate the American public and hopefully help the Trump administration, as if they need me, to stay on the right side of history when it comes to these debates and our work. So you wrote some stories in the Center for Immigration Studies. I'm sorry, I don't even think I introduced you properly. You are a research fellow or senior fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies.
Yes, it's okay.
Sorry, I don't script this stuff, so I'm just coming out batting. Um, and your articles, I follow them all the time. But what caught my eye was the United Nations and these NGOs. How many did you say there are? 300 and some NGOs involved in this uh, big program?
This is according to their own budget documents. There are 15 UN agencies. The Mama and Papa Bear are UNHCR, United Nations High Commission on Refugees, and IOM, the International Organization for Migration. Those are the two big ones, but then there's UNICEF and there's all these other ones. And then uh, partnering with them are 230 NGOs. A lot of them are international, based in the U.S. A lot of them are strictly based in the U.S. And they are all in one big partnership since 2019. It's a collaborative partnership where they together move hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year to the migrants on the trail to aid and abet their movement forward, wittingly knowing that they are moving forward to our border and
You
over our border.
called this a collaboration between the UN and these 230 plus NGOs, both international and the United States. Would it be correct for me to say that I consider it a criminal conspiracy, that these are organizations that are attempting to subvert American law?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's beyond my pay grade. That's, but that what you just said reflects the level of frustration and anger that information like this provokes among especially Republican lawmakers. This is for the last 2 or 3 years spawned numerous bills to defund the United Nations. People are angry at the very idea that taxpayers are funding their own mass migration crisis over their own border and don't seem to know about it or have a say in it. And
We're
it's
funding it. And is it at $1.9 billion that we put forward toward this?
that's just to the UNHCR, one of the two, and that's the majority of their funding comes from us. But the IOM also gets a majority of it. The UN as a whole gets the majority of its funding from American taxpayers and has ever since the late 1940s. So that's nothing unusual. But in this case, people in the United States are wondering, well, how come we didn't get a say in how our taxpayer money is being spent? And the answer to that is because nobody reported it. It hasn't really been reported until this very large scale mass migration happened. It didn't just happen, it was engineered. It was orchestrated. It was very professionally done. It's probably uh, the most competent thing that I've seen come out of the Biden administration, actually.
And out of the UN, because the UN is intended to encourage or keep the peace. And of course, since the UN started or was established, we've had probably more wars and conflicts and more dead people and and human trafficking and all the rest of the miseries that we've seen. So they're not very good at almost everything they do. But they're really competent when it comes to this kind of effort. And that, I think, would, for most people, tell you that there is an agenda that drives the failure in some areas, which we won't go into, the peace part of it. And there's an agenda that encourages the competence of or the success of their efforts against the United States of America. And I think this really goes back pretty far, because when I was rereading, I have it in my pad as well, that you mentioned the international, what the IO,
International Organization for Migration,
yeah,
IOM.
IOM, and it has nothing to do with Apple. So it's the IOM, and they released a document in, I think, about 20 years ago in 2000, and it was called Replacement Migration. You can grab it anytime you want to. It's right there. They're not hiding anything. And what replacement migration refers to is the international migration that a country would need to offset population decline and population aging resulting from low fertility and mortality rates. The irony, I find, is that they have this theory and they want to put it into practice. I think I'm seeing results of that theory being put into practice, but they're trying to help Western nations, presumably. Well, my goodness, Western nations have a low replacement level, and they're we need to help them through migration to keep their replacement level of fertility up. And so when I look at that study, I ask myself the question, was that one of the first steps leading toward this initiative from 2019?
So I have looked at that document. I know what you're talking about. It is a theory. It's more of an economic theory. This idea that we don't have workers necessary to grow the economy, and so we have to import the labor force. That's kind of the idea behind that replacement theory. Uh, in There are other theories too about why. It's probably the most common question I get. Why are they doing this? Why would somebody deliberately do this and do it so right and do it so expertly? I might add. Um, and I have my own theory about this, and I write about this in the book. And since I do, I might as well talk about that. If I've got a minute or two about that, it's a little bit complicated. You have to go to electoral politics of 2018, 19, and 20, which is to say that the Biden candidacy was one of, you remember this, one of 15. It's a very crowded field back then, and everybody pretty much understood. All of those candidates understood that they had to be opposite Trump on his immigration platform in every possible way. The more opposite you can be of Trump, build the beautiful wall and shut down the border and border security, the better you are going to do in the primaries. And my theory is that in order to achieve uh, primacy to emerge from that crowded field, the Biden campaign understood that it needed the Bernie Sanders voters, that block. Remember that rock liberal block. Well, those college educated young predominantly white men and women subscribed to this idea that border enforcement, detention, deportation were akin to slavery or Jim Crow laws or the Nazi Holocaust in more extreme versions. And they
Did you say these are college uh, graduates? Because that form of reasoning is very suspect.
just picture the pro-Hamas demonstrations on college campuses, and next to the Arab students and the Arab ones, those are the guys I'm talking about. The
Yep.
white, those are the ones.
Angry.
Uh, yeah, and subscribing, swallowing a belief system that it's simply immoral to stop people from going where they want to go. That it's cruel. It causes death. It creates death trains back to death concentration camps and home countries. We've got to bring all these people in. We've got to let them know. Abolish ICE. Remember, abolish ICE. All of that stuff was resurgent, and those were ideologies that had been around for 15 years. But even the Democratic Party the last 20 years understood that that was just simply insane. All of the things that these people were spouting were just too insane to get unlocked from the basement. Well, the Biden Harris campaign, Harris her own, unleashed them and let them out of the basement and took to take over the asylum basically. And in return for their votes and their loyalty, the Biden administration gave them control over the things that they wanted most. And the top thing was immigration. Now, where did those people come from? The political class. They came not from think tanks like the one I work for. Traditionally, political appointees come out of the think tank world. tanks. Not this time. Those people came out of the NGOs that we're just talking about. They were workers, they were employees, they were in leadership roles of those NGOs. And how do those NGOs thrive? By taking government money and resettling and managing migration problems. So
They're just continuing what they were doing in their NGOs out of their advocacy heart and what they believe ideologically. And then they just brought it into government and essentially furthered their previous work. And it wasn't
but
necessarily based on white papers and studies and data and economic
no,
examination. And yeah,
the one piece I would add to your summary there is that they became fabulously wealthy from what they did. They engineered a crisis that they then profited by at levels that nobody has ever seen before. And I mean hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in grants, direct grants from the State Department, USAID, and no bid contracts on the US side in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, billions really. It all went through the same NGOs that orchestrated the crisis. And so it was self-dealing in a maximum way, a maximalist way. Remember Eisenhower, when he left office, warned the country just as he was leaving, beware the military industrial complex, because should they ever get a hold of American foreign policy, we shall be forever at war, because they make the bombs and the bullets and build the aircraft and the ships and all that. And he's saying, watch out for them to get, well, that's what happened here. You had the industrial migrant advocacy complex gain control, government power over
which
the immigrant
agencies? Over ICE? Were they brought into ICE? Were they brought into Homeland Security?
border patrol, ICE, State Department, all over State Department, USAID, the National Security Council, the Domestic Policy Council. Chapter 4 of my book lays it all out, who they all are. And since then, a bunch of them have gone on to become the heads of IOM and UNHCR, working directly with their old buddies inside government. So it,
Let me ask you a question because I've been I've known that this has been happening, and I knew it was NGOs, and I knew there was massive amounts of money that was of American money that was funding our own demise and enriching these crooks masquerading as humanitarians. That's usually always add the word humanitarian to whatever your organization is going to be called, and then people will say, "Hey, look, the humanitarian blah 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 says." I knew that was happening, but I was so happy that I was going to be able to, it's after the fact. I want to be able to go back and reconstruct using your full treatment of it in Overrun, your book, and be able to become an expert on understanding what happened. Because if we can look at this and say, we're going to plug every hole, tie every knot, close every door and window, and this cannot happen again. I do know that your book does not address the United Nations primarily. What you're looking at is, how did this happen in the Biden administration? It's like history as is happening, and it's an expose type of history. But do you see the UN, because your stories here are independent in a sense of your book, Overrun, and available at Amazon and other fine bookstores. If you Do you believe that these UN organizations and NGOs are ramping up to continue the push, maybe use different tactics, maybe use lawfare, but to continue the push during the Trump administration? Because that's what I think I'm seeing from your articles.
I think that's at this point it's speculative because those the people that run those agencies, nobody ever asks them point blank or puts them on in the hot seat to question them, and they're not talking about it out loud what their intentions are. But I try to parse out in this document I mean, they publish their material online. There's no big secret here. The only impediment to general public understanding is that the documents are really long and it takes a while and boring. So you have to go through them and read them. But
I'm reading the
in,
Regional Refugee and Migrant Response Plan right now.
that's exactly
That's the big
that's the
one.
one. They lay it out. They tell you what their ideology is. You can see in the document that they are very witting about the fact that most of these people are on their way to the United States and they don't care. They're perfectly content. They probably like it.
I think that that's where they're directing it. That's kind of what I got out of this.
Well, and so listen, the United Nations is especially those two agencies. That is their job. That's their mission. It's in their mission set to help refugees and migrants not die as they're moving. But what I argue is that the American taxpayers, because they in this particular case where you had 12 million people, 10, 12, but nobody really knows, but millions and millions of people cross over, have a right to have their say about whether that's where they want their tax, that's how they want their tax money spent. The UN is going to do what the UN does, and that's what they do. I have interviewed them on the trail. I've met them. I've talked to the NGOs. I've watched them operate. And I'm telling you, they tell me that they are happy to provide the grease on the skids to the US. They don't they are not worried at all about law breaking or the politics. They
That's
think
why I
they're
call it
doing
a crime syndicate or a cartel because I
well.
think, I'm sorry, that's why I call it a criminal conspiracy, which is against federal law, criminal conspiracies, and it's a cartel, it's a crime cartel because it doesn't matter if you have the imprimatur of NGO or nonprofit status, you put humanitarian or love and hearts in your name, or the UN is involved. The UN has done many, many unlawful, illegal, or wretched things in their long history. That is sure. So this to me rises to a level of criminality when someone on the ground, and you've been on the ground talking to these people. I mean, this book is great too because you're on the ground and you're telling personal stories of interactions with the various smugglers or UN agent representatives. It's really entertaining as well. It's not just a book of statistics. But what I'm saying is it is breaking our law to bring these migrants in over the border the way they're doing it. Even though we're funding it, or maybe because we fund it, it's not against the law.
I was in the Darien Gap in August. I went down to Colombia. On the Colombian side of the Darien Gap, there's like a farmer's market of these NGOs all set up there. They have big billboards in the small towns that are the staging towns for the Gap, saying, here's where you can find all the food and aid and assistance that you need for the trip. And when they operate in these towns, they are operating with the permission of what's called the Clan del Golfo, the Gulf Clan, or the Gaitanista Self-Defense Force of Colombia, which is an 8,000 man paramilitary that controls the whole region. You cannot operate in that region without their express
What is it
permission.
called again?
It's called the Clan del Golfo, or the Gaitanista.
Like the clan or tribe or organization of the Gulf.
Cartel. It's a
It's a
cartel.
cartel.
It's not a Mexican cartel. It's the Colombian one.
Colombian cartel.
Yeah, and that cartel is vicious, brutal, murdering, kidnapping, pillaging kind of a place. And they run camps for the migrants. And inside one of the camps, I found these NGOs inside the guarded perimeter of these NGO of the
Of Clan
Gaitanese
de Golfo.
Clan del
Del.
Golfo. Um, I can send you when we're done. I did a big video report about exactly this. I've got it all on videotape, the whole thing. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that there is a collusion between these NGOs. It's my belief that there is an active collusion for years between these NGOs and the UN and criminal organizations in the countries where they operate, including in northern Mexico with the regular Mexican cartels, because you can't operate in a lot of the areas of northern Mexico without some sort of an arrangement.
They
And
become
if the
states within states. They literally are no longer there by permission of the local or governors. They're actually driving it. They become that independent.
the Colombian government does not control northwestern Colombia, where this is all happening. Period. They're not. They may do a military raid or a drug operation here and there, but they don't run anything there. But in fact, in Gulf Clan cartel territory, completely controlled, you can find Colombian federal migration officers at the ferry boats that are being loaded all day long with guys that are carrying backpacks and water jugs, obviously going through to the Darien Gap. You have local town tax collectors collecting a tax from every single one of those migrants. Everybody's in on this thing. Um, I came back incredibly from that trip in August. I've spoken about it. I've written about it. Um, Sort of eyes wide open for the first time about the level of collusion between the criminal organizations and the UN and the NGOs. You can't operate without
Let
cutting
me
a
say
deal with
something, Todd. I think really what happens here is this. We look at these things and many of us will say, oh, this has got to be really bad an inch deep. You just scratch a little bit and you're going to see how bad the collusion, the conspiracy, and I don't mean that as a conspiracy theory, but legal conspiracies or illegal conspiracies and collusion between internationalist, globalist organizations and individuals and parties or whatever in separate countries. And it's almost like you have to see it face to face to really fully understand it, like you just said. You
true, so true. Because I mean, I had to go jump through hoops to get Gaitanista approval from. Like, I was on a FaceTime phone call with like the mafia boss in this area, negotiating to get permission to go into camp number one in Acandia on the Colombian border with Panama. I did get the permission. Uh, the guards there are all Gaitanista soldiers, and they let us in. And inside, there they all are, the NGOs. In fact, there were banks that were set up for wire service money so that the immigrants could get the $400 to pay the Gaitanista foot guides to go through. These are banks. I'm not saying they're U.S. banks. It looked like they were Colombian banks or whatever. The point being that there has to be collusion for them to operate down there. And I'm guessing there has to be money has to change hands for that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's money involved as well going directly into cartel hands. Now, that's south of our border. You talk about, is it a criminal conspiracy? Is there criminality? I strongly suspect, I don't have evidence of it, that on the U.S. side, there was so much contract money let with no bid contracts to NGOs that operate inside the United States doing all kinds of things like resettlement. We're the guys that get the buses and the chartered buses and take you from one city to the other, or we we buy your pots and pans, we arrange your housing, we get your kids in
I
school.
saw whole hotels. One, I don't know if it was Ben Berquam, went to a hotel. It was a Hyatt or I don't know, I can't remember, Ramada, whatever it was. It was a nice multi-story, very, very large hotel. Not a luxury hotel in a downtown um, of a city, but it was massive. He couldn't get in. They stopped him. And it was because only migrants were allowed. And the federal government, they said, was funding it. I don't know if you saw that report.
Every major city in America has that happening. That's not just no,
They built it. This was a brand new building, brand new hotel, massive, massive hotel, and only migrants were intended to go there. And they said, I don't know if it's true, that the federal government owned it or paid for it, but that's another story. You know, you're talking about these funds, our funds that are going to pay the UN agencies, 14, 16 agencies. Then you have 300 NGOs that we know of. And many of those are being funded or were funded by the Biden administration, and
yes,
perhaps even in previous administrations like Trump 45, because, the State Department and all these departments, the corruption is so deep, you wouldn't even know what USAID, you just don't even know what's going on there. So I don't think he
right.
probably was able to treat that. But what it's like is we're getting hit so many ways. We're funding it without giving permission for the actions to the tune of billions of dollars. Then all of the consequences, the law enforcement, the people using our hospitals, schools, and other agencies. It's and then now I call it repatriation. I notice that you use that, and you're the only other person I've seen call it repatriation, flight repatriation or air repatriation. And I don't think we
Yeah.
should even call it deportation. We're just sending them home to their home. It's not just some nightmare scenario that we're sending them home. We're repatriating them there. But so then we pay for all of that. So this is cost. What is your guesstimate between what we've given? I mean, you can't even start.
I mean, just astronomical. Nobody, I mean, one thing I pitched this idea, I don't know if it'll ever go anywhere, that what we need is a national truth commission with some teeth to really study what happened and like how big was this and why did they do this and who did it. I wrote that right after the election because, uh, it seems like there's so much that we don't know. I wrote my book based on the first 2 years of this thing, but now there's been another year and a half, 2 years since then. And if you're going to dig yourself out of this, if you're going to repair the damage, you have to assess the
You
damage.
need a map. You need flowcharts. You need hierarchies. You need dollar figures and spreadsheets. And I think, like you said,
We need emails. We need emails,
oh
and
yeah,
hopefully
we
nobody
need emails.
will destroy any material on their way out.
And I think that we need to be open to, and I'm not going into the political part because I want to focus on this. Yeah, I'd like Liz Cheney in jail. Or prison. That's irrelevant here. I'm not talking about that kind of thing because I want it to be a little cleaner. I believe every NGO, everyone who's funneled money into the NGO from the administration, we should seek legal action or prosecution of those persons because they have cost us billions and billions of dollars. Is that possible?
Yes, but I think it's going to be your better cases are going to be on the fraud side of what they did, not on the fact that they aided and abetted people that were illegally present. Because remember a lot of the people that were brought in had like stamps in. They were kind of had permiso. They had permission at the border. They were released sometimes on humanitarian parole, which is a quasi legal, so that the NGOs will just simply say, well, the government
That's
said
been
they're
the
illegal.
problem all along because as we've been talking about this for several years now, 4 years now, the unprecedented idea of releasing tens of millions after they've gotten to the border of illegal aliens instead of sending them back. I mean, that's madness. It's
That's
lunacy.
that's what we did. We're the only country, I think, in the history of countries that have ever did that.
I mean, go back to
Nobody
Babylon, Assyria, Greece, Rome. I mean, it doesn't even, it defies.
ever does that. No country that exists today or through history has ever done that. But we did it in this 4 years. If I could just get back quickly to, so the thing that needs to happen is that there has to be, like we had for COVID relief, task forces, fraud task forces that look into how COVID relief money was stolen by this one or that group or that the other one, and bring those people to justice. Well, I think that you will not have to pick very far at all into the NGO contractor, subcontractor, sub-subcontractor industry in this country to find price fixing, improper contract steering, overcharges, theft, outright theft, overcounting. I think that over the next 4 years, that you're going to start seeing indictments for fraud brought to bear against NGOs for what they did. There's no way that that kind of money flowing out of the State Department and USAID and other appropriation funds uh, didn't attract a bunch of fraud. That's just human nature. It happened. Uh, so, so I
Plus,
think that
especially in their with their worldview, because the end always justifies the means in a Marxist, socialist mentality, whatever to achieve the means. And part of it, I think, I mean, a huge portion of this, it for many is just plain self-enrichment. Let's become rich. Let's make a lot of money. But I
that's
think
what
that, go ahead.
I was just going to say. I agree.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
there are lots of theories like, oh, they're importing Democratic voters. I'm an old school journalist. I did it for 23 years. It's always about the money, man. I mean,
it
that's
is.
usually what.
I agree, but I do believe this. I have beliefs that I will act on whether it's for money or not because I believe in the one God and I believe in truth and justice and the law and the prophets and the gospels. I believe those things and I will do things just because of my deep-seated belief. And if you want retribution in this woke, international woke ideology, and it goes back to Marxism and socialism, you want to destroy those who have been lifted up or lifted themselves up and become successful. There is a great deal of envy and anger and resentment, bitterness against America just because. I mean, there's good reasons to be angry with us. I mean, sometimes some families in Iraq might have a good reason to be angry with us. Um, but the point is, there many are angry and bitter and resentful because of success and the socialism, Marxism, all of that. The desire is to bring us down, and one of the easiest ways to do it non-kinetically is to bring us down economically and completely destroy our culture. And you know what? When I looked at those numbers for immigrants being moved into cities, guess where we found out? All of the immigrants were being moved into, not all, a huge proportion of immigrants over a two-year period were moved into red states. Now, you would think that the blue states who welcome them with open arms and have all these programs and say, we're here for migrants, legal or illegal, right? They would get them right before an election to bring a huge number of them in red states. I don't know. Maybe that's off topic, though. That's off topic. I want to talk about this. The Trump administration, thank goodness, is here. And we know that they recognize, obviously, that migration, immigration, legal and otherwise, I would say, is the key issue for the American people that's not inflation, right? It is really about immigration and reform. Do they fully understand this UN NGO component of it, that this has been
No,
they do not?
no. I think that that is a very underreported and often misunderstood part of this. And also it's open to interpretation. You know, you can, yeah, I've interviewed some of those UN people and I've quoted them too. And, you know, their interpretation of what they're doing is we're not aiding and abetting mass illegal immigration at unprecedented, unparalleled magnitudes. We are just simply here to make sure they don't die while they're doing it. So, and that's our
Yeah, but
mission.
we could always say that there's not to push back really as much as to say we could be so clinical in our analysis that we can never ascribe motivations, because unless the criminal says I was motivated by lust or greed or this and that, we can't ascribe that.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think we have, don't you agree, every indication that there is an ideological aspect to this?
Oh, very, very much. You know, I talk about the money part, you know, being an old school journalist guy, being cynical about the money part, but I do believe that just as much this is ideological. There's a gratification factor that they must feel at finally being let out of the basement to be in charge and to implement their vision. Their
The
vision
parents
is
are out of town. Have a
right.
party.
The vision is totally insane. Even the Democrats would never let these people out of the basement. They kept them trapped down there. They never gave them. Bill Clinton was pretty tough on illegal border immigration. Obama, they called him the deporter in chief. And I'll never forget, you know, some heckler one time at a public event said, "Hey, why won't you end all your deportations? Stop all this deportation." And Obama turned around and said, it's the law. I have to do it. Like that's Barack Obama said that. And he deported 1 million a year. I'm just saying that regular Democrats would never ever countenance anything like this. It's just that we had a weird Democrat in a strange circumstance let them out of the barn
You
and gave
know,
them
we need to
power.
do more reporting on this at WorldNetDaily, so I invite you. We should talk off camera about this because for the next 4 years, we are all in on this issue. Not to say that there's an end date, but the point is we're not going to let it go. And I'm doing, I don't know how many shows I'm going to do because I want to cover every single facet of a 100 facet diamond. I don't want let anything left uncovered. And I think that you just identified for me, because this was my question. I'm concerned with 2,000 fires to put out in the United States. Actually, that was nothing to do with California. I mean, every single agency is going to be bombarded with weeding out corruption, overspending, regulation gone wild, moles and apparatchiks that don't leave, that are going to undermine, overturning so much that has been done in the last years. Just look at the last 3 months with Biden, or 2 months. I mean, it's just executive order orgies, right? And so I think this really needs to be examined for the benefit of the Trump administration. Who are you looking at? This UN NGO collusion and this, I love the idea of National Truth Commission. So I think we should go with that. um, I'll go back and read that article. What, who in the administration, is it Christine Nome? Is it, who are the top dogs that need to really know this um, this information? We'll put out a special report on it too.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, it's Cash Patel. I mean, this is an FBI. This has to be an FBI task force because I mean, we had one put in place for COVID aid. They're still putting out press releases every month about new people that are indicted for frauding the government on, whatever. That's got to happen here. That's got to be cleaned up. But also, you're right. DHS secretary, all of the DHS agencies. It's going to be. They just named um, Rodney Scott, the commissioner of CBP, and Mike Banks for Border Patrol, um, Kelly for ICE. They all have intelligence agencies. The intelligence community working south of the border, that's not just the CIA, but it's the CIA, but it's also DIA, military intelligence that have footprints in places like Colombia, where they can go down there and collect on the things that I was talking about earlier in your show. Uh, there needs to be collaboration between the State Department. So you got Rubio there, and maybe more importantly, Chris Landau, who's the Deputy Secretary of State, uh, pegged to be the Deputy Secretary of State, to work with those governments down there and bend their arm for intel about what those NGOs are doing, what they're up to down there, what their intel is. If you don't have any intel, I call BS. But if you want to insist you don't have any intel, then start getting some.
Exactly. Let's give this lovely example, horrifically, um, horrible example, and that is what's happening in Tapachula, Mexico. So you can't make this stuff up. I've started to say that, and I hate that phrase, but it really actually means something. It's real. A 75,000 square foot mega mall built to enable industrial scale illegal immigration to the U.S. border is almost online here in this key entry city in southern Mexico, just south of the border from Guatemala. Now, this you did on October 30th, 2024. That
Well,
was
this sounds familiar.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. This was written by Sir Tom Bensman. Anyway, so it's a great story, all kinds of pictures, and they have a Nicaraguan on his